Riley and Anne approached the once familiar facade, both with bated breath as Riley twisted the doorknob. What once was their family home, now a weathered relic bearing the scars of decades gone by. The front door, once a portal to a haven of shared memories, creaked open with a mournful sigh, as if echoing the passage of time. The living room, bathed in a pallid light that filtered through moth-eaten curtains, greeted them with an air of desolation. The walls, once lined with family photographs and vibrant paintings, now stood bare, stripped of the visual narrative that once chronicled the passage of their lives. The furniture, worn and weary, bore witness to the ebb and flow of years, each piece a silent testimony to the inevitable march of time. The living room, once a hub of laughter and shared stories, felt strangely alien, a space that had forgotten the echoes of the past. As Riley and Anne moved towards the kitchen, the heart of many a family gathering, they found themselves navigating a landscape of unfamiliarity. The once bustling room, now shrouded in shadows, exuded a chilling emptiness. The table, where countless meals had been shared, stood cold and abandoned, a relic of a time lost to the ages. The absence of familiar aromas and the eerie silence intensified the sense of estrangement. The hallway, a conduit of memories that once echoed with the laughter of childhood and the patter of hurried footsteps, now seemed haunted by the ghosts of a time they didn't spend together. The walls, etched with faded wallpaper that seemed to peel away like layers of forgotten stories, whispered of a past that slipped through their grasp. Photographs, now yellowed and sepia-toned, depicted faces they struggled to recognize, a visual testament to the inevitability of change. Emotionally, the air within their once vibrant home felt colder, as if the memories that once breathed life into the space had been erased by the relentless passage of time. Riley and Anne stood in the midst of the little tight corridor that connected all the rooms, confronting a poignant tableau of a past that had morphed into an unrecognizable present, a home that had weathered the storms of decades, its walls now holding the echoes of a life they once knew, but no longer felt. As Anne ascended the creaking stairs that once echoed with the patter of her childhood footsteps, a flood of memories enveloped her. The staircase, worn by the passage of time, seemed to groan beneath the weight of nostalgia. Each step carried her closer to the sanctuary of their shared bedroom, a place that held the echoes of countless shared secrets and whispered tales. As Anne ascended the creaking stairs that once echoed with the patter of her childhood footsteps, a flood of memories enveloped her. The staircase, worn by the passage of time, seemed to groan beneath the weight of nostalgia. Each step carried her closer to the sanctuary of their shared bedroom, a place that held the echoes of countless shared secrets and whispered tales. The door, ajar with a hint of melancholic invitation, swung open as Anne approached. The room that had once been a haven of shared laughter and imaginative play now lay before her, an empty canvas of faded recollections. The sunlight filtered through tattered curtains, casting a subdued glow upon the barren walls that once witnessed the tapestry of their growing years. Anne's eyes swept across the room, a treasure trove of memories that unfolded like a poignant storybook. The corners held traces of where once cherished toys had stood, now absent, leaving behind a void that mirrored the ache in her heart. The bed, where they lay side by side during sleepless nights, seemed smaller somehow, as if the passage of time had compressed the space where their shared dreams once unfolded. As Anne wandered further into the room, the remnants of her memories played before her like a bittersweet film. Toys, now absent, left only the faintest imprints on the carpet. The walls, once adorned with posters reflecting their shared interests, stood bare and indifferent to the emotional tide washing over Anne. Overwhelmed by a profound sadness, Anne sank to the middle of the room, her fingers tracing the ghostly outlines of what once was. Huddled with her knees against her face, she succumbed to the weight of the emptiness surrounding her. The room, once alive with the energy of shared stories and teenage disagreements, now echoed only with the silence of a past irretrievably lost. Tears welled in Anne's eyes as the realization settled in the room that had once cradled the essence of their shared existence was now an empty vessel, a poignant testament to the inevitability of change. The hollowness of the room echoed the ache in Anne's heart, and as she wept amidst the echoes of a bygone era, she mourned not just the loss of a room, but the fragments of a cherished past slipping through her fingers like sand. Stepping through the back door of the kitchen, Riley found himself in what was once a meticulously tended garden, a sanctuary of vibrant colors and fragrant blooms that whispered tales of nurturing hands and shared moments. In the canvas of his memories, the garden was a haven, a place where laughter echoed and the scent of flowers mingled with the warmth of sunlight. However, the present unveiled a stark contrast. The garden, now abandoned and overgrown, bore the weight of neglect. Weeds reached skyward, entwining themselves around forgotten remnants of flower beds. The air, once filled with the sweet perfume of blossoms, now carried the earthy scent of untamed wilderness. As Riley traversed the tangled path, the solitary silhouette of graves from the local churchyard loomed beyond the garden's edge, casting a somber shadow over the neglected landscape. The gravestones, weathered sentinels of time, stood as silent witnesses to the passage of years, their inscriptions softened by the patina of seasons gone by. The air hung heavy with a damp chill as Riley's body, slightly limp from sadness, edged closer to the fence at the back of the garden, his heart heavy with a foreboding sense of loss, felt the need to pull back some of the rotting foliage on the concealed headstone on the other side of the fence, now rotting away under mold and moss. Cold, damp leaves cradled the stone like a shroud, masking the name etched into weathered marble. With trembling hands that are ice to the touch, he began to sweep away the debris, the dirt that laid inside the etched words on the stone, making it harder to read. As each leaf was cast aside, a revelation unfolded. The engraved letters emerged, revealing the name that had been obscured by the veil of neglect. Riley's fingers traced the contours of the letters as he read the words aloud, in loving memory. A silent tremor coursed through him as he continued reading. He shakes his head in disbelief, of Mary Thatchett. And then the weight of the revelation stuck him like a bolt of lightning. Riley, overcome with grief that had long lain dormant, silently took a deep breath in before screaming at the top of his lungs. Tears blurred his vision as he clutched the headstone, a tangible anchor in the storm of emotions that raged within. In the solitude of the abandoned garden, Riley's wailing cry pierced the air, a raw, unfiltered expression of pain and loss that resonated with the ghosts of memories long buried. The sound, a haunting echo of a son mourning a mother, reverberated through the neglected landscape. From her bedroom window, Anne, alerted by the heart-wrenching cry, witnessed the scene unfolding below. A surge of concern propelled her into immediate action. Without hesitation, she ran through the echoing corridors of the empty house and burst out the back door, drawn instinctively to Riley's side. The garden, a witness to the unfolding tragedy, bore witness to Anne's arrival. She found Riley, huddled beside the headstone, the weight of grief etched across his face. Without words, Anne joined him in silent solidarity, offering a comforting presence in the face of profound loss. Together, They navigated the labyrinth of emotions that the neglected garden had unwittingly unveiled, forging a bond that transcended the silence of forgotten memories and the loss of someone so dear they couldn't comprehend the pain. Amidst the stillness of the neglected garden, Mrs. Perifold emerged like a figure woven from the threads of sincerity, her presence a gentle song to the raw wounds of grief. She approached Riley and Anne, huddled beside the weathered headstone, with a quiet understanding etched across her features. Her steps, though purposeful, carried a softness that belied the weight of the moment. Mrs. Perifold, attuned to the ebb and flow of emotions, approached with a tenderness that acknowledged the profound ache in their hearts. As she drew near, the air seemed to shift, imbued with a subtle magic that spoke of solace and understanding. With a voice that echoed like a soothing melody, Mrs. Perifold began to share tales of love and loss, of the enduring connection between the living and the departed. Her words, woven with wisdom and empathy, wrapped around Riley and Anne like a comforting shroud, offering a bridge between the realms of memory and the present. She spoke of the resilience of the human spirit, of the power to find strength in the echoes of shared love. As her words flowed, Mrs. Perifold's hands, gentle and reassuring, rested on their shoulders, bridging the gap between the tangible and the ethereal. Slowly, as the narrative unfolded, the grip of grief began to loosen its hold on them, if only momentarily. Mrs. Perifold, with a delicate touch, guided Riley and Anne away from the headstone and into her open arms, inviting them to step back from the abyss of sorrow that threatened to engulf them. The tendrils of empathy she wove around their hearts gently encouraged them to embrace the memories, finding solace in the knowledge that love endures beyond the confines of time and physical presence. In the wake of Mrs. Perifold's guidance, Riley and Anne, though still carrying the weight of their loss, found a renewed sense of purpose. Mrs. Perifold chanted while she waved her wand up, across to the left, down with a flick of her wrist. Rena Florelia. Mrs. Perifold, her eyes aglow with ancient wisdom, surveyed the desolate expanse of the neglected garden. With a wave of her hand and a whispered incantation, tendrils of magic cascaded through the air like ethereal vines. The atmosphere tingled with energy as the arcane forces responded to her command. Nature itself seemed to stir as if awakening from a long slumber. The air shimmered with iridescence as Mrs. Perifold chanted, her words a harmonic resonance with the elements. The overgrown weeds yielded to the gentle coercion of her magic, retreating to unveil forgotten paths and dormant flower beds. Where neglect once held sway, vibrant blossoms emerged, painting the landscape in hues of remembrance. The once dilapidated garden transformed before their eyes. Delicate petals unfurled, and the air filled with the sweet fragrance of newly bloomed flowers. A mosaic of colors danced on the breeze, a living and breathing miracle that spoke of renewal and reverence. The headstone, now a centerpiece surrounded by a circle of flourishing flora, seemed to radiate with a quiet, dignified grace. Satisfied with the transformation, Mrs. Perifold turned her gaze to Riley and Anne, the weight of sorrow lifting from their hearts. "This garden," she intoned, "is now a memorial, a living testament to the love that transcends through the ages. While a mother can never truly be forgotten, she watches them always from a place of peace. Her twin flames are forever protected by me. That is a promise." Her words, infused with the residual magic that lingered in the air, carried a sense of closure and renewal as she touches the headstone with honor. With a final gesture, Mrs. Perifold guided Riley and Anne away from the enchanted garden. The gate, once rusted and forgotten, swung open as if beckoning them to a new beginning. As they stepped onto the familiar street, the garden lay behind them, reborn as a sanctuary of remembrance. Mrs. Perifold, her presence a fleeting whisper of magic, nodded in silent acknowledgement before fading into the shadows of the enchantment she had woven. The street, touched by the echoes of ancient incantations, cradled the departing trio, carrying them forward into a future where the seeds of love and memories would continue to blossom. As they walked up the modern street lined with quaint cottages, a lingering silence enveloped them. The weight of emotions from the visit to their mother's grave still clung tightly to Anne and Riley, casting a subdued atmosphere over the trio. Anne's eyes reflected a mix of sadness and introspection, her thoughts weaving through memories of her mother's warmth and the bittersweet realization that the gravesite marked a tangible connection to her past. Riley, usually boisterous and full of energy, moved with a quieter demeanor. The experience in the garden had stirred a contemplative air in him, as if the gravestones had etched not only the names of their mothers, but also the unspoken stories of the lives they had led. Mrs. Perifold, sensitive to the emotional undercurrent, walked alongside them, offering silent support, knowing that grief unfolded in its own time and rhythm. As they reached the end of the street, Riley notices a neighbor. The surrounding cottages with vibrant gardens and welcoming facades seemed to echo a quiet reassurance. The gentle hum of everyday life whispered promises of healing and renewal. The trio, though still carrying the weight of loss, began to sense a glimmer of hope amid the narrow lanes and well-tended gardens, symbolizing the potential for growth and new beginnings in the face of their shared sorrow. Riley's gaze wandered across the picturesque front gardens as they strolled down the narrow parts of their old street, and a familiar figure caught his eye. The neighbor, diligently pruning bushes under the final rays of the afternoon sun, seemed vaguely recognizable. A puzzled expression crept across Riley's face, uncertain about the identity until the neighbor's face turned toward him. A sudden shock swept through Riley as he realized it was one of his old school friends. Time had etched lines on the once familiar features, leaving behind traces of the years that had slipped away. As two young children burst out from a nearby house, their laughter filling the air, Riley felt a poignant pang of nostalgia. The realization that life had moved forward without him and Anne struck him with a mix of happiness and melancholy. The children, carefree and exuberant, symbolized the relentless march of time, a stark contrast to the weight of grief they carried from the cemetery visit. The moment intensified when his old friend locked eyes with Riley. A wave of recognition flickered in the friend's gaze, but uncertainty lingered. With a quizzical smile, his friend approached, asking, "Hey, do I know you?" Riley's heart sank for a moment, realizing that the passage of time had not only changed appearances, but also altered the landscape of relationships. Riley spoke with a very sad tone. "Sorry, mate, you must have got me mixed up with someone else." The once smooth, tanned skin of his young friend was now lined like crumpled paper. Riley turned away from the man he used to know and walked away quickly. In that instant, the bittersweet reality of time's passage could be cut with a knife, the juxtaposition of old connections and new beginnings etched into the suburban tableau. Mrs. Perifold, sensing a need for a private conversation, guided Anne a few steps away from Riley. Her gaze seemed strict, but also knowing. It bore the weight of a secret that had been kept for generations. As they moved into the shade of a gracefully arched tree, Mrs. Perifold began to unveil the intricate tapestry of their family history. "In the shadows of our past lies a tale that intertwines our fate, Anne," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of age-old secrets. She spoke of a bond that transcended time, a connection to the Thatchet family that reached back through the centuries. The prophecy, she explained, was not a mere coincidence, but a result of ritualistic blood magic set in motion by two witches bound by an ancient pact. That pact was made by their great-grandmother, which tied their bloodline to the original coven. One member of that coven remains. She spoke fluidly and without hesitation about an cursed object that connected them then till now. As Mrs. Perifold delicately unraveled the story, Anne's eyes widened with a mix of astonishment and disbelief. The magic that bound them was not arbitrary, but intricately linked to a shared lineage. The prophecy, encapsulated in the motto that echoed through generations, spoke of the profound connection between two souls born from the Thatchet bloodline. The revelation carried a weighty responsibility, as Mrs. Perifold explained that the curse could only be broken by one of the intertwined souls, a choice that rested on the delicate balance between destiny and free will. In the remaining dappled sunlight, Anne absorbed the story of her heritage, the weight of a centuries-old legacy that had quietly shaped her life. The revelation left a lingering sense of trepidation as the quiet suburban streets around them held the echoes of a magical history that now bound Anne and Riley as one, ready for the journey ahead. In a secluded corner of the quiet suburban street, Mrs. Perifold turned to look behind her, the flow of her cloak span being held in mid-air for a moment. Her eyes fixed on an open and empty road, yet Anne and Riley could hear soft voices along with the rustle of leaves. "The curse! It's speaking to you both, isn't it?" Mrs. Perifold shouts through the wind. "I can't make anything out. It's in a different language," Riley shouts back frantically. "It's in the language created by the ancients. It's not been spoken for centuries. I can understand it, but not with all this noise." Mrs. Perifold lunges forward towards Anne and Riley, grabbing onto both of their shoulders with force. Mrs. Perifold raised her hands slowly and carefully, while ancient symbols materialized, etched in shimmering patterns around her. The air quivered with a palpable energy, as if the very fabric of reality hesitated at the cusp of transformation. With a resolute gaze, Mrs. Perifold channeled the arcane forces that dwelled within her, initiating a ritual that bridged the realms between worlds. As the incantations unfurled, Anne and Riley felt a profound pulling in the very essence of their beings. The world around them blurred and fragmented as if reality itself were unraveling. Mrs. Perifold's eyes, a conduit of mystic knowledge, gleamed with a potent blend of determination and ancient wisdom. Suddenly, an ethereal force enveloped both Anne and Riley, weaving them into a luminous wave of energy that spiraled upward. The transition was a magnificent flow of sensations, a whirlwind of colors, sounds, and indescribable energies. The suburban landscape melted away, replaced by a spiraling portal that opened before them like a cosmic gateway. They were caught in the torrent of transition, a dance of cosmic forces propelling them towards the unknown. As Anne and Riley soared once more through a rip between worlds, their physical forms dissolved into radiant particles, merging seamlessly with the energy that propelled them forward. They became a harmonious convergence of light and essence, adrift in the boundless space between realities. Mrs. Perifold, standing at the epicenter of this mystical phenomenon, held the threads of magic with unwavering focus, guiding their transcendence. The portal deposited them with a gentle, swirling descent onto their feet under the twists and turns of a rock formation suspended above them and the breathtaking landscape of the highlands. The air was charged with a serene energy, and the floating shards of rock that emanated a rich crimson light. Anne and Riley, now solid once more, found themselves standing on this celestial perch, surrounded by the dip of a whimsical valley nestled between majestic mountains under a pastel dome of clouds. A green pasture sprawled below, kissed by the soft palate of an unseen celestial source. The air was crisp and filled with the dance of swarming fireflies and the distant murmur of a crystalline stream. Anne and Riley, still catching their breath from the cosmic journey, looked around, trying to find the words to help them speak. Mrs. Perifold, with a steady stride, led Anne and Riley through the ethereal landscape of floating rocks. Each step was like walking through water. As they approached the center, Anne glanced upward, her eyes drawn to the intricate symbols etched onto the surfaces of the levitating stones. Strange creatures, alien to them, painted on the rock faces, their forms fluid yet strange. The symbols seemed to pulse with a rhythmic heartbeat, emitting a faint hum that resonated like distant electric currents. Riley, ever vigilant, pointed upward with a sudden urgency. Following his gaze, Anne noticed a surreal sight. The floating rocks, once suspended high above, were now gracefully descending to meet their eye level. In that moment, a serene hush enveloped the surroundings, as if the very essence of these rocks, their breath in anticipation for something to happen. As the rocks settled into a tranquil alignment around them, a peaceful silence reigned. The air whistled with the lingering energy of the symbols, and Anne and Riley exchanged a glance, captivated by the surreal beauty of the suspended rocks. It was a brief interlude, a suspended moment of wonder in the heart of this enchanted domain. Unexpectedly, the tranquil peace shattered. The rocks, which moments ago hung gracefully in mid-air, plunged suddenly into the ground with a thunderous resonance. The ground quivered beneath their feet as the stones anchored themselves into the earth, creating a protective barrier around the trio. Anne, Riley, and Mrs. Perifold fell to the wet soil of the ground, taken by surprise at the abrupt transformation of their surroundings. The once floating rocks now stood as sentinels, forming an intricate pattern around the trio. The symbols etched upon them now were blinking radiantly, but in a frantic motion, as if it was a warning. The rocks, now firmly grounded, began to emanate that warning around them. Their surfaces bathed in a radiant crimson glow, an ominous illumination that pulsed with an intensity matching the hastening beat of a foreboding drum. Anne and Riley exchanged apprehensive glances, sensing an unsettling shift in the mystical energy surrounding them. In the midst of this luminous sign, Mrs. Perifold's eyes narrowed with a deep understanding. "That can only mean they already know we're here," she uttered with a grave certainty, her voice carrying a weight of knowledge steeped in ancient lore. Her protective stance tightened around Anne and Riley, the flicker of concern reflecting in her eyes. Mrs. Perifold's keen awareness of the impending danger stems from her deep understanding of the magical world and the intricate trials set forth by the Academy. As the twins find themselves targeted by a horse-like creature, she recognizes it as a deliberate test orchestrated by the Academy to assess their magical prowess. The selection by the chalice implies the twins possess a strength or potential that has garnered the attention of the magical authorities. In Mrs. Perifold's perspective, this perilous challenge serves as a pivotal moment for the twins. Overcoming such a formidable beast is not only a testament to their magical abilities, but also an indicator of their suitability for enrollment in the Academy. The Academy, in its wisdom, has chosen to evaluate the twins in a real-world scenario, pushing them to prove their mettle and resilience. Simultaneously, Mrs. Perifold grapples with the weight of responsibility, acutely aware that the twins, with their limited knowledge of the magical world, face imminent danger. The dichotomy between their ignorance and the lethal threat posed by the creature adds an extra layer of urgency to her role as a protector. She understands that failure to shield them from this perilous trial could lead to dire consequences, possibly even fatal outcomes for the unsuspecting twins. In essence, Mrs. Perifold's complex thoughts reflect a blend of appreciation for the Academy's rigorous testing methods, concern for the twins' safety, and a profound understanding of the stakes involved in navigating the magical realm. The delicate balance between allowing them to face challenges and shielding them from potentially lethal situations underscores the nuanced nature of her role in guiding them through the perilous journey of their magical education. Yet, a peculiar helplessness pervaded the moment. Mrs. Perifold, a seasoned practitioner of magic, found herself momentarily unable to conjure the protective spells needed to shield them from the approaching threat, her delicate yet powerful wand backfiring with every incantation. The radiant rocks, now pulsating with an urgent glow, stood as both guardians and harbingers, their crimson luminescence echoing the urgency of the impending danger. In the distance, the air distorted like ripples of heat to form a shadowy disturbance. A form, dark and elusive, began to materialize against the vibrant hues of the moors. It took shape as a horse-like creature, its silhouette shrouded like a steed, cloaked in midnight, that seemed to defy the very essence of light. The creature's eyes opened, staring them down with a moonlight gleam, fixated on Mrs. Perifold, and the twins reared up as if to charge toward them. As the dark, shadowy entity stood motionless, the place was filled with an unsettling tension. The crimson glow of the rocks intensified, casting an eerie glow upon the scene. Mrs. Perifold, her instincts sharp, braced herself against the encroaching threat, a silent determination etched upon her face. The quiet landscape, once a haven of wonder, now bore witness to a beast, a fearless creature that seemed to stare into their soul. They all knew this would be a confrontation that would unveil the true nature of the prophecy that had drawn Anne and Riley into this place. The dark steed emerged from out of the shadows into the rays of the moon, covering the sun in a blanket of endless night, a haunting silhouette against the radiant backdrop of the valley below. Its form, draped in an inky darkness, moved with an eerie grace as it galloped towards them. The muscles beneath the shadowy hide rippled with an unnatural strength, each sinewy movement resonating with an ominous energy. As the creature approached, the surroundings quivered with the sound of its echoing neighs, a spectral symphony that broke through the enchanting valley. The sounds were not of this world, a dissonant melody that sent shivers down the spine of those who heard it. It was a sound that seemed to transcend the boundaries between the living and the dead, a call from the abyss that heralded the arrival of a dark force. The mane of the steed, seemingly woven from the shadows themselves, billowed behind it like a sinister veil. But then, in a sudden burst of malevolent magic, the darkness that shrouded its mane ignited into flames. The flames danced with an unholy brilliance, casting an eerie light upon the surroundings. The juxtaposition of the dark steed's shadowy form and the infernal blaze that consumed its mane created a chilling spectacle, a creature born of both darkness and fire, a harbinger of impending doom. As the dark steed closed the distance, its eyes glowed with an unnatural fervor, fixated on Mrs. Perifold. The crimson glow of the rocks intensified, reacting to the malevolent presence in their midst. Their hearts fill up with tension as the fiery-maned steed bore down upon them, a nightmarish embodiment of ancient forces. In the face of the approaching dark steed and the ominous energies that surrounded them, Mrs. Perifold, the seasoned practitioner, knew that she needed to tap into the very essence of the elements. Slowly, with a deliberate grace, she sank down onto her knees, never taking her eyes on the creature to not alarm the twins. Regardless inside, she was screaming with fear. Amidst the long blades of grass that carpeted the enchanted floating rocks, she bent forward toward the ground. Her fingers, weathered by aged veins and enchanted with trinkets, pierced the soil with a purposeful intent. The connection between Mrs. Perifold and the earth beneath her intensified, and a profound stillness settled upon the valley. As she delved deep into the soil, a ripple of ancient magic emanated from her touch, intertwining with the very soul of nature. Mrs. Perifold's head tilted back slightly, her eyes closed tight, as if communing with unseen forces. A powerful energy, raw and primal, coursed through the earth, crawling up her fingers and enveloping her form. The long blades of grass quivered as if in acknowledgement of the ancient power awakening within their roots. As the earthly magic surged, Mrs. Perifold's head flew backward suddenly, her silhouette outlined against the canvas of the sky. The connection between her and the land deepened, and her body became a conduit for the raw forces that flowed from the very heart of the mystical realm. The air coursed with the energy of the earth, and a luminous glow enveloped Mrs. Perifold, casting an ethereal radiance upon her figure. Powerful currents of magic ascended from the soil, crawling up her body like branches of light. The surrounding landscape responded, as if acknowledging the reawakening of a primal force. Mrs. Perifold's stance became a symbol of resilience and strength, her form bathed in the interplay of earthly magic and cosmic energy. In that transformative moment, as Mrs. Perifold's mastery over the ancient magic intensified, the dark steed, once a formidable force, began to yield. Its gallop slowed, and with each powerful stride, the creature succumbed to the potent forces woven into the very fabric of the mystical realm. The dark steed, compelled by the compelling grasp of Mrs. Perifold's magic, bowed down onto one knee, its head hanging low with weakened breaths. Sensing the creature's weariness from the magical connection, Mrs. Perifold released her grip. As the earthly energy withdrew, a transformative shift coursed through the dark steed. The cloak of darkness that had shrouded it began to unravel, revealing a mesmerizing sight beneath. In the final moments of the mystical clash, the once dark steed transformed into a silver, shimmering Pegasus. Its form radiated with an ethereal glow, and as the shroud of darkness dissipated, a long, elegant horn emerged from beneath the residual shadows. The majestic creature, now freed from the oppressive darkness, stood before Anne and Riley in its true form, a mythical being that embodied both grace and power. The particles of the dissipating darkness ascended like stardust, creating a mesmerizing spectacle against the mystical sky. The blanket, as dark as the night, fractured into countless fragments that floated upward, reaching toward the skyline. It was as if the very essence of the malevolent magic that had once bound the creature now disintegrated into cosmic particles, dissipating into the atmosphere. With the remnants of darkness dissolving into the mystical air, the newly transformed Silver Pegasus approached Anne and Riley with an air of grace and tranquility. Its hooves made a soft, ethereal sound against the grass-covered rock, and its wings shimmered in the ambient light of the enchanted realm. The Pegasus, once a dark steed wrought with malevolent energy, now stood before the twins with a gentle demeanor. As if sensing the connection that had unfolded, it lowered its majestic head toward Anne and Riley, offering a gesture of friendship. The creature's intelligent eyes bore no trace of the shadows that once shrouded them. Instead, they held a warmth and wisdom that seemed to acknowledge the newfound bond between them. The ethereal creature walked elegantly toward them both, still in awe of the creature's transformation. Tentatively, they reached out to stroke the Pegasus's silvery mane. The touch was met with a soft nuzzle, as if the mythical being sought to affirm the friendly connection that had been forged in the crucible of magical confrontation. Mrs. Perifold, standing a few paces away, looked over her shoulder toward the heartwarming scene. A smile played across her face, a reflection of satisfaction and approval. The ancient practitioner had guided the twins through a profound journey, and the sight of them bonding with the once dark steed, now a radiant Pegasus, filled her with a sense of accomplishment. As Anne and Riley shared a moment of connection with their newfound mythical companion, the realm echoed with a harmonious energy, the culmination of ancient magic, newfound bonds, and the transformative power of hope. Mrs. Perifold, still smiling, observed the scene with a knowing, as if acknowledging that the threads of destiny had woven a tapestry of connection that surpassed even what she could have thought. The silver Pegasus, now a beacon of ethereal light and transformed grace, moved with purpose among the floating rocks. Its hooves seemed to barely touch the ground, leaving a shimmering trail in their wake. Anne and Riley, captivated by the creature's every movement, followed with a sense of awe, their eyes fixed on the radiant form of their newfound companion. The Pegasus, with an air of ancient intuition, approached each stone as if guided by an unseen force. Its eyes, wise and discerning, surveyed the surroundings, and a soft glow emanated from its horn as if detecting something hidden to mortal eyes. The twins, curious and entranced, trailed behind, watching the creature's every step with a sense of anticipation. As the Pegasus moved gracefully from one stone to another, it seemed to be seeking out an essence, a resonance that echoed with the energies of the mystical realm. Anne and Riley exchanged glances, their silent communication expressing the shared understanding that this mythical being held a connection to them and the mysteries surrounding them. As the residue of ancient magic shimmered under the sunlight, beaming down on the foursome, and as the steed moved around the grassland, the stones responded. Soft pulses of light emanated from the rocks in a metallic shimmer, creating a celestial dance of illumination that mirrored the movements of the creature. Anne and Riley, enveloped in the magical spectacle, continued to follow the Pegasus with a sense of reverence, aware that they were part of a journey that transcended the boundaries of everything imaginable. While the silver Pegasus moved with deliberate grace among the floating rocks, its horn glowed with a gentle radiance. Anne and Riley, following in silent wonder, observed as the creature approached a particular stone, distinct from the others. The Pegasus, with an air of ancient knowledge, tapped its horn against the stone 3 times, each tap resonating like a soft, unspoken melody. Echoes of the taps lingered in their ears. The chosen stone responded in an unusual manner. The surface of the rock seemed to ripple, as if the very fabric of reality was bending to the Pegasus's command. At that moment, prisms filled the area, and the rock began to shift, revealing a hidden opening that had been concealed from plain sight. From the heart of the stone, an enchanting chalice emerged, gliding forward with an otherworldly grace. The chalice, crafted from a material that seemed like an iridescent crystal with an inner light, held an aura of old magic. Its intricate design bore symbols and patterns that spoke of a rich history intertwined with the forces that permeated the world around them. The Pegasus, its wise eyes reflecting a sense of purpose, nudged the chalice gently with its nose toward Anne and Riley. Looking towards Mrs. Perifold, they both are seeking her approval. The enchanted vessel hovered on the wind, suspended by the same magic that had brought it forth. Anne and Riley, captivated by the unfolding spectacle, approached the chalice with curiosity. The air around the chalice crackled with an energy that beckoned the twins to touch it. As Anne and Riley extended their hands, the chalice responded, gliding into their grasp as if recognizing the connection forged between them. In that moment, the trio stood amidst the floating rocks, forever taken back by a myriad of emotions. The chalice, a vessel of ancient power, held the promise of secrets yet to be unveiled, a tangible link between the past, the present, and the destiny that awaited Anne and Riley.